The 25% U.S. tariffs on all steel and aluminum imports took effect on Wednesday. South Korea is among America's trading partners to be affected by the move, and it has activated a response system. Having gone through a rough patch, the U.S. and Ukraine agreed to a 30-day ceasefire following talks in Saudi Arabia, which will be presented to Russia. With eyes on when a verdict will be given on whether or not to remove President Yoon from office, political division only grows wider, with lawmakers from the rival parties taking to the streets. It's March 12th, 8 p.m. in Seoul. This is Newscenter. Thank you for joining us. I'm Yoon Min. Starting today, the Trump administration's 25% levy on steel and aluminum products that America imports from countries around the world went into effect. With this, the yearly tariff-free quota applied on Korean steel products has been scrapped. The authorities and businesses here are closely watching the move. Our Choi Soo-hyung has the latest.
Starting Wednesday, a 25% tariff has been imposed on steel and aluminium exported to the United States. The new tariffs have been applied worldwide without exceptions. For steel, the tariffs affect countries including South Korea, Canada, Brazil, Mexico, European Union member states, Japan, and the UK. For aluminium, previous exemptions for certain countries and products have been removed, and the tariff has been raised from 10% to 25%. However, 166 derivative products, including bolts, nuts, and springs, are subject to tariffs, whereas 87 derivative items, including automobile and aircraft parts, are exempt until further notice. As a result, Canada, which is the largest supplier of steel and aluminium to the U.S., is expected to face the biggest impact. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, in 2024, Canada accounted for 23% of total U.S. steel imports and about 60% of aluminium imports, while South Korea ranked fourth in both categories. South Korea's duty-free quota system for 2.63 million tons of steel products, which began in 2018, has now been ended, and the tariff on aluminium has been increased from 10% to 25%. The removal of the export volume limit under the quota system could provide an opportunity to expand exports to the U.S. However, there are concerns about the country's weakened competitiveness due to China's low-priced products and a decrease in international demand. The reciprocal tariffs that the Trump administration has announced to begin on April 2nd are expected to accelerate the ongoing trade crisis. In particular, the planned tariffs on key South Korean exports, such as semiconductors and automobiles, are increasing uncertainty for its market in the U.S. Moreover, the U.S. livestock industry has called South Korea's ban on beef from cattle over 13 months and its agricultural quarantine system unfair, urging the Trump administration to take action. Amid the growing crisis, the South Korean Ministry of Trade, Industry and Energy will strengthen the public-private emergency system in response to U.S. tariff measures and prepare strategies to address reciprocal tariffs on items such as automobiles in early April. Choi Soo-hyung, Arirang News.
So what are the implications of U.S. import duties on steel and aluminum for South Korean businesses? Moon Hae-ryun takes a look.
With the Trump administration's 25% tariffs on steel and aluminium imports kicking in starting Wednesday, South Korean firms are bracing for impact. Previously, exports were duty-free but capped at 2.63 million tons under a quota system. Now the quota is gone, but all shipments will face the tariffs, posing both risks and opportunities. As tariffs now apply to top exporters Canada, Mexico and Brazil, South Korea, the fourth largest supplier to the U.S., may find new openings in the U.S. market. Still, the risks are significant, with intense competition such as cheaper steel products from Southeast Asia, as well as the inclusion of steel and aluminium-derived products, such as bolts, nuts and springs, under the new tariff scheme. These products are primarily manufactured by small and medium-sized businesses, which have fewer resources to absorb the impact, making them especially vulnerable to financial losses. At a conference on Wednesday led by the Ministry of SMEs and Startups, industry insiders spoke up about their concerns. Xinjiang Fasteners is one such company that produces nuts and bolts, with 35% of its sales dependent on exports to the US and Europe.
Developing new products to stay competitive isn't easy, especially when it comes to sourcing materials. It's not like there's a set supply from the start. You have to create value and generate demand through product development.
Another company, GJ Aluminium, discussed the challenges of diversifying its exports.
We're trying to focus more on Europe and Southeast Asia. But the challenge is that our facilities have primarily been set up for the U.S. market, and each of these new regions has very different requirements and characteristics.
In order to minimize the impact on domestic firms, the South Korean government is building a support system such as stabilization funds and 15 nationwide support centers, as well as gathering opinions.
It looks to be around 1,800 domestic farms that are currently exporting to the U.S. We want to move quickly with a survey to get a clearer picture of the expected impact and what kind of targeted support these businesses will need.
Following Industry Minister An Duk-geun's visit to Washington to establish a communication channel with the Trump administration regarding tariffs, the country's Minister for Trade is also due to visit the U.S. to continue talks. Moon Hae-ryun, Arirang News.
Fresh employment data for the month of February remained robust. But when taking a closer look, it wasn't the case for the employment of younger people, with the rate having recorded the sharpest decline in about 4 years. Moon Ji-young covers the latest findings.
The number of people in employment grew by 136,000 last month, marking 2 consecutive months of growth. However, the employment of young people remains sluggish. According to data released by Statistics Korea on Wednesday, the number of people employed last month increased by over 130,000 compared to the same month the previous year, bringing the total to 28.1 million. In terms of individual sectors, the manufacturing sector has experienced 8 consecutive months of decline since last July. The construction sector saw employment shrink for the 10th consecutive month compared to the previous year, primarily due to a downturn in the construction industry. However, the healthcare and social assistance, science and technology services, and ICT sectors all added jobs. Employment rose by 0.2 percentage points for those aged between 15 to 64. However, the employment rate for those aged 15 to 29 recorded the sharpest decline since January 2021, dropping by 1.7 percentage points to 44.3%.
The unemployment rate remained at 3.2% compared to last month. The number of unemployed individuals rose by 25,000 to 940,000 year on year.
The number of people unemployed aged between 15 and 29 increased by 5,000, with the unemployment rate for this group recorded at 7%. The number of people choosing not to work aged between 15 and 29 was recorded at 504,000, surpassing the 500,000 mark for the first time since statistics began being collected in 2003. At a ministerial economic meeting on Wednesday, the government pledged to improve labor market conditions through a fourth-quarter livelihood and economic support plan. It also vowed to create high-value-added jobs in emerging industries, including AI, and to enhance working conditions for researchers in the semiconductor sector. Moon Ji-young, Arirang News.
We now turn to the Constitutional Court as speculation abounds over the date of the ruling on President Yoon's impeachment. For more, our political correspondent Shin Ha-young is standing by live at the court. Ha-young, when can we expect to hear the court's verdict on the president's political fate?
Well, Jung-min, today was the expected day for the announcement of the ruling date based on the initial expectation that the verdict would be delivered this Friday. However, we are still waiting for the Constitutional Court to announce this. And this means that considering previous presidential impeachment trials, when the dates came out 2 to 3 days in advance, the chances of a ruling this week now seem less likely. And since the final hearing last month, the court has been holding deliberations almost every day for the past 2 weeks, excluding holidays and weekends. And despite this, it has already been the longest deliberation period of presidential impeachment trials. And if the ruling comes next week, it will also set the record for the longest time from the impeachment of a president to the final verdict. And it is reportedly known that Yoon's case is taking longer because there are many contested issues. And also, with the impeachment verdicts on the chief state auditor and 3 top prosecutors scheduled for tomorrow, it's expected that Yoon's case will likely be pushed back to next week, as it's rare for the court to issue major rulings on consecutive days. And if the ruling happens early next week, there may be a notice by the end of this week, so we'll need to keep an eye on this.
Moving on, does the president's recent release from detainment look to affect the court's ruling on his impeachment?
Well, the general consensus in the legal circle is that it won't have much impact. And this is because the issue with the detention cancellation mainly concerns how the period is calculated, which is different from the presidential impeachment trial that focused on the declaration of martial law. And however, as a whole court's ruling on Yoon's detention also highlighted procedural flaws in the investigation process, some say it could put some pressure on the Constitutional Court. An official from the court said the judges will assess whether there is any impact, but noted that the investigation records from the CIO were not used in the impeachment trial, so it's unlikely to have a significant effect. And following the detention cancellation, there were calls from the ruling party for hearings in the impeachment trial to resume. However, so far, there's been no move from President Yoon's side asking for a resumption. And if more hearings are held, there are concerns that a delay in the ruling could lead to more pressure from the opposition party over the appointment of Constitutional Court Justice nominee Ma Eun-yeol, a left-leaning judge recommended by the opposition Democratic Party.
And I hear protests for and against the president remain intense. Tell us more about that.
Sure, Jung-min. Well, I can definitely say that both the size and volume of rallies are growing in front of the court ahead of the verdict. And the political battle between the rival parties is also escalating outside the National Assembly. And the main opposition Democratic Party marched from the assembly to Gwanghwamun this afternoon, calling for Yoon's impeachment. And the ruling People Power Party said it wouldn't hold protest or pressure the Constitutional Court, but some of its members are staging relay protests in front of the court. And also today, PPP lawmakers visited the court and submitted their second petition to appeal for the court to dismiss Yoon's impeachment. And meanwhile, police are considering issuing the highest emergency level on the day of the ruling, which would allow them to mobilize up to 100% of available police officers. And additionally, the Land Ministry announced today that a flight ban will be in effect over the Constitutional Court from midnight Wednesday until the end of this month. And that's all I have for this hour. Back to you, Jung-min.
All right, Ha-young, thank you for that coverage. That was our correspondent, Shin Ha-young, reporting live from the Constitutional Court. Elsewhere, Ukraine is prepared to accept a U.S. proposed 30-day ceasefire with Russia, recently having gone through a rough patch with Washington. The U.S. has resumed the military and intelligence assistance to Ukraine. Now it remains to be seen how the Kremlin will respond. Our foreign affairs correspondent Bae Yoon-ji covers this prospect and more.
Talks between senior officials from the U.S. and Ukraine that took place in Saudi Arabia appear to have been fruitful, as Kyiv agreed to a proposal for an initial 30-day ceasefire with Russia. In a joint statement on Tuesday, the U.S. agreed to resume military aid and intelligence sharing with Ukraine, immediately after Kyiv said it was ready to accept the peace deal proposed by Washington. The two sides also said they'll conclude an agreement for developing Ukraine's critical mineral resources as soon as possible. U.S. Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who led the U.S. delegation to the talks, said Washington would present the ceasefire offer to the Kremlin, noting that it's now up to Russia to end the fighting.
Hopefully we'll take this offer now to the Russians, and we hope that they'll say yes to peace. The ball's now in their court.
But how Moscow might respond is far from certain. U.S. President Donald Trump also said he hopes Russia agrees to the ceasefire proposal, hinting that he may talk to Russian President Vladimir Putin about it possibly this week. He added that he's willing to invite Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky back to the White House.
Get the Russians to agree? I'll talk to Vladimir Putin, yeah. I want to get, look, that's the other, it takes two to tango, as they say, right? So hopefully he'll also agree. And
Zelensky, who was in Saudi Arabia but did not participate in the talks, said the ceasefire was a positive proposal, but stressed that Washington must convince Moscow to agree to it as well.
Ukraine accepts this proposal. We consider it positive. We are ready to take such a step, and the United States of America must convince Russia to do the same.
European leaders welcomed the 30-day ceasefire proposal, saying the EU is ready to play its full part in the upcoming peace negotiations, while also adding that this is a positive development that can be a step towards lasting peace for Ukraine. 배은지, Arirang News.
On the defense front, South Korean and U.S. forces are holding their annual training session, which is also the first major joint exercise since the return of the Trump administration to the White House. Our defense correspondent Kim Bo-kyung has more.
Troops aboard Korea-U.S. Suryeon utility helicopters approach the landing zone. While the U.S. soldiers keep watch, Korean soldiers conduct air assaults. About 400 troops from the ROK Army's 1st Infantry Division and the U.S. 2nd Infantry Division ROK-U.S. Combined Division's Stryker Brigade held joint exercises on Tuesday. The drill at a training facility in Paju City is part of the Allies' computer-simulated Freedom Shield exercise that began its 11-day run on Monday. It aimed to strengthen South Korean-led combined operations capabilities with an ROK Army battalion commander directing U.S. company operations.
Through thorough war games, from helicopter boarding to capturing the objective, South Korean and U.S. troops were able to move as one. In particular, by sharing combat expertise between the two countries' forces, we were able to further enhance our combat capabilities.
So we were very fortunate that we can conduct this combined training with the Republic of Korean Army. It is a great learning opportunity for my soldiers and myself to increase interoperability with the Republic of Korea Army and to strengthen the alliance.
In connection to Freedom Shield, the Navy's 2nd Fleet also led an integrated port defense drill at the western port of Pyeongtaek, Dangjin. Responsible for guarding the west coast, the Korean Navy aimed to boost response procedures for aerial, chemical, biological, and radiological threats against the port and many other critical national infrastructure sites, along with the Army, Police, and Coast Guard.
We will continue to protect key facilities in the West Sea with a strong and close-knit coordination system with relevant agencies.
The on-field drills are to continue until March 20th. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
The Trump administration has nominated a former ambassador to Thailand as the next U.S. Assistant Secretary of State for East Asia and the Pacific. U.S. President Donald Trump announced the nomination of Michael George Desambre on Tuesday, saying that he will work incredibly hard for the country. Desambre served as ambassador to Thailand during Trump's first term and is currently a partner at Sullivan & Cromwell, a New York law firm where he leads mergers and acquisitions in Asia, including South Korea. The Assistant Secretary of State for East Asia and the Pacific oversees diplomatic affairs related to South Korea and other East Asian countries and must be confirmed by the Senate before officially assuming the role. The SPHEREx space telescope, part of NASA's mission to map the universe, is now in space in partnership with South Korea's Space Institute. SPHEREx was launched successfully on Tuesday from Vandenberg Space Force Base, California, aboard a SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket at around 8:10 p.m. local time. According to NASA, it later established successful communication with its near space network in Norway. The launch comes after several delays since late February due to rocket assessments and bad weather. The mission will help scientists uncover how the universe formed and evolved. On the entertainment front, boy band Stray Kids has become the first K-pop act to earn the most gold-certified albums by the Recording Industry Association of America. According to the association, the group achieved their 5th gold certification with the album Hop on Tuesday local time. Its gold certification is awarded when sales of albums or singles on a different listing reach 500,000 units in the United States. With 5 albums and 4 singles certified by the association, Stray Kids has now earned 9 gold certifications. Hasukjip is the Korean word for a boarding house that rents out a room, with the option of a meal or 2 every day. This form of accommodation was quite popular among college students here in Seoul up until the late 1990s, and it's been making a notable comeback in recent days. Park Go-nu tells us why.
A small, quiet living room filled with university students. That's because a variety of 15 side dishes that might be quite costly at a restaurant are served twice a day at mealtime at this boarding house. These dishes are all cooked by the owner herself, who says it's a joy to prepare them for the students. Communal meals at boarding houses were common in South Korea up until the late 1990s, but as millennials began prioritizing privacy, studio flats have become more popular since then. However, students living here today say privacy isn't that much of a concern, as there are bigger benefits.
Since I live in Seoul, eating out is quite expensive. I spend about 50K per day, but that's how much I would save by eating here.
More students are choosing boarding houses to keep costs down.
During COVID-19, there were almost no students, but after the pandemic, demand surged even among foreign students.
I came from another country. It's quite expensive. I don't cook that much, no time, more convenient compared to other places.
This boarding house, built decades ago and showing its age, has become increasingly popular with every single room booked. And it's not just this house, but according to data, boarding house reservations rose by around 20% in the first 2 months of this year compared to last year. An official from an online accommodation platform added that boarding houses are cost-effective for students, especially when compared to other housing options.
In Korean style, we say the one room, 1 month's price is more than 700,000 won. Boarding house, there are no deposit, and the average price is 400,000 won, include the meals.
As boarding houses offer students an affordable option in an era of high costs, with rent, meals, and utility bills all included, this trend is expected to continue among students on a limited budget. Park Go-nu, Arirang News.
With cloudy conditions across the country, there was light rain in the Seoul metropolitan area, western parts of Gangwon-do province, and Jeju Island today. The daytime temperature in Seoul rose up to 11 degrees Celsius, a bit lower than yesterday. It will rise back to 14 degrees tomorrow, feeling like early April. However, in addition to fine dust, yellow dust will arrive overnight. Therefore, the concentration of fine dust will stay at bad levels in most parts of the country tomorrow. In Incheon, Sejong, and the Chungcheongdo provinces, very bad levels of fine dust will cover the skies. Tomorrow morning will be very similar to today. Seoul and Daejeon will start off at 3 degrees and Jeju at 8 degrees. Daily highs will move up to 15 degrees in Chuncheon, Daejeon, and Gwangju, 16 degrees in Gyeongju and Busan. There is rain forecast nationwide on Sunday with a cold snap. That's all for Korea. Here are the weather conditions around the world.
That is Newscenter for tonight. Thank you for watching. A panel session up next.